Moderation helps people feel safe. Okay, we got that. I mean, it was still playing. It was just a note to the moderator. Okay, so anyway, first I got to apologize. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. It's really hot here, and we've got tons of fans going, trying to cool down our classroom, and it's still windy. So I apologize for the wind noise on the microphone. I'll try to keep that as close as I can. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about failure to launch, which is real similar. You know, back in the 80s, a guy named Dan Kiley, Dr. Dan Kiley, a psychologist, developed the idea of the Peter Pan syndrome, and it's not a DSM diagnosis, but it's so point on that it's definitely been incorporated into the therapeutic field. As a young man in the 80s, I remember getting that copy of that book from my mom. She used to give me all kinds of things, and she gave me a copy of the Peter Pan syndrome, and I remember reading it, and it really has to do with, you know, young boys who just, for whatever reason, aren't growing at the rate of our peers for whatever reason. And we're going to get into some of those reasons tonight. Now the term is, you know, failure to launch, but it's really the same thing. You know, you think about Peter Pan, the boy who never grew up, and every Peter Pan. You know, like, it's crazy because I could read that book and I absolutely recognize the characteristics in it, but really didn't know what to do about it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that seems like me. And then you just kind of go on with your own life, which is so typical of anybody who's who needs to go through a process of change, but they just don't understand the significance of it. You think, well, I'm going to, somehow, some way, things will be different in 6 months. Not recognizing that the change has to come from within. It's not going to come from outside of me. It's got to come from within side of me. But if I knew how to make those changes on my own, I would have already done it. And so that's actually one of the biggest characteristics in, you know, a failure to launch case is really we lack the ability to identify the actual problem, which means whatever solution we come up with is never a right one. It's not going to affect change. So let me just kind of kick into it. The actual description of failure to launch is just a delayed transition into adulthood. You know, I've seen a lot of memes along this lines. You know, it's like, oh, he has trouble adulting. He's an adult that has trouble adulting. And okay, that's fair enough. That is kind of what it is. The important thing is to be able to just recognize it. It's nobody's fault. It's and as family members, it's easy to take on that. You know, oh gosh, we talked about that last week. Well, there was that one period, and we wish we'd have done something different, and they've never been the same since. And so then when we the patient become a young adult, I know my mom certainly parented out of guilt. She felt guilty. I don't know why. Just that self-blame. Well, it must be my fault. You know, I've raised 3 boys and 2 of them are drug addicts, so I must have done something wrong. You know, not understanding the disease model of addiction and the emotional stuff and the perspective, the trauma perspectives. So I got to start with that. For family members that are watching, you can't take ownership of this one. Failure to launch is just what it is. Now, as family members, we can do things that can keep it going, and that's why we're doing it as a group, so you can identify those things and what looks like a healthy boundary. But it all comes down, well, it doesn't all come down to this, but it's really important. You hear us talk about this all the time, implementing a value for value relationship with our adult child that may be struggling in life. Because one of the primary thinking for the patient, let me see if I can find it real quick. Well, it's really, there's an entitlement, there's an unrealistic expectation. Where is it? Well, shoot. Maybe I never got it on here. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if we have a history of having our needs met without effort, and there's kind of a nuance here. That doesn't even have to be reality. It just has to be perceived that way. So, again, I'll use me as an example. So my mom, she gives me a weekly allowance. And for that allowance, I have to take out the trash, and I got to do this, and I got to keep my room clean, and all these things. And if I don't do it, then she doesn't give me the allowance. But like in my case, what would happen is I didn't see that as effort for the money. I saw them as two different things, even though that's exactly how it was presented to me. You get this if you do these things, right? There's an equal exchange. But in my mind, I'm probably going to take out the trash anyway because I want to. For some reason, I like trash cans, and I want to keep my room clean because I don't want to be embarrassed when my friends come over. The money part of it was just an expectation. And so we can, and that's why it could be different for everybody, and this is why families can't take blame for it. It's our own personal perspective of what things mean. And of course, when you're 8 or you're 10 or you're 14, you don't really have a right perspective. You have an emotional perspective. So whatever I'm feeling is reality. That must be it. And my mom is supposed to give me $20 every Friday, and she didn't do it this week. And so what becomes, that's kind of the beginning phases of the survival mode. And fast forward to now, this is why it's so important as we're growing as family members, and we're growing with the patient.
Miles, the camera's facing me.
We have to start implementing. Wow, sorry about that.
Yeah, I just got on the phone and I just noticed it. There you
Okay. We have to start implementing value for value and be crystal clear about that, right? We've got to define it. Everybody needs to understand it. This is the deal. We're expecting you to do this, and you can expect us to do that. Kind of like, and what guides that should be, we won't help you get sick. We won't help you stay sick, but we will help you get better, whatever that, it's all relevant or relative to whatever the situation is. Okay, so, yeah, let's go a little bit quicker because I want to get all this in and get you guys out of the heat. All substance abusers struggle, have failure to launch in various degrees. And I'm going to get to some specifics because there's some people right now going, oh, no, that doesn't apply to me. And I had substance abuse problems, but I kept my house, kept my car, kept this, kept that. Well, I'm going to cover that in a minute. The COVID period made failure to launch worse. And this isn't going to be like a big tirade about COVID, but it's an interesting fact. And of course, we've seen this a lot more too. I've worked with so many younger guys who were in high school, starting college in that period, and they have problems they shouldn't be having. And a lot of it is attributed to this COVID period. 50% of 18 to 29-year-olds during the COVID period had to move back in with their families because of obvious reasons. So you didn't have to go to school during that period. You didn't have to go to work. The message is that we really didn't need to do anything, and we would still get a check. Right? The government. People were staying on unemployment because I think they were doing like 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more than the normal. So everybody just filed unemployment, and then when it was time to go back to work, you'd make more money just staying on the government rolls or whatever. And so, bring this into a psychological context. The brain isn't even fully developed until about 25. And so 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, that age range was so impacted by that. So even if they didn't have kind of failure to launch problems up to that point, that sure was a huge factor. But it's the same things that are happening. It's this delayed transition into adulthood. And that's why I say it doesn't matter why. and that's futile to try to figure out what's to blame, who's to blame. It's always this perspective issue, this emotional perspective, um, and it killed aspirations. It killed motivations. Why? It didn't make sense. Well, why would I go and do this? You could have all the goals and the plans and ideas in the world, but because your brain's not fully developed and because you haven't solidified any of those plans or goals, it was so easy just to kind of sink into that. And that was the big thing that got pushed too, right? It's like, hey, stay home, get you a Netflix subscription, and we'll send you money. And I'll stop it there, because now I'm starting to think about all the abuse and the the drug deaths just skyrocketed during that period. And it was a bad thing. So it's not just that, but that's an interesting factor I wanted to throw in. Failure to launch is not a lazy issue. It's not about laziness. In fact, any kind of procrastination or slow development rarely has anything to do with lazy. Most people just aren't lazy, but it seems that way. But what's happening is it's this person has had mental and or emotional issues throughout their life. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well, we're gonna get to that. So developing emotional survival skills, and so this is where we, remember, trauma is a perspective thing. So I gave an example earlier. I'm 10, and even though my mom has implemented this value for value relationship, I'm not seeing it like that. I'm seeing the expectation part of it, that my mom is supposed to, provide for me. She's supposed to meet my needs without my effort. So I can do what I want to do when I want to do it, right? That's an emotional development problem, which sounds really dramatic, but it's not. It's very subtle. And then it just builds, and this way of thinking grows and grows and grows. And of course, a 10-year-old doesn't know how to express that. You don't even identify that there's a problem. It's just the way things are, which makes it that much more difficult when we come to recovery or change. So in this development of emotional survival skills, we tend to compare ourselves with other people, right? What that person's doing, how well they're doing, what their plans are, how popular they are. Low self-esteem or low self-image comes out of that. We become unsure of how to put it all together, having all kinds of ideas and talents and skills, and excelling in some areas, but really having a difficult time just bringing it all together for whatever reason. And then don't know how to communicate that. That's a big one. And so it kind of leaves the person just going inward and stuck. But not just stuck with expectation, right? This mental expectation. I remember having, I think I put it on the board too. I said, this is an actual quote. Let me see. Basically, yeah, right here. This is my quote. These are my words, because that was my thinking. It never came up in a discussion. It was never any part of a conversation, but I came to recognize in my own early journey that idea was always in my mind. And if it wasn't my mom, it was going to be my grandma. And if it wasn't my grandma, it was going to be my grandfather. Someone else would always fix it. So, what does that mean? I'll speak for me. What it did for me, this thinking that you don't know how to identify, you definitely don't know how to communicate it. It lessens the significance of personal responsibility. I can pretty much do what I want to do when I want to do it, and if it does go bad, whatever that looks like, if I do get evicted, if I do wreck the car, if I do whatever, it'll be okay, because I've got, we're not talking about family support. We're talking about a mindset that is expecting to fix it, to problem solve it, to make it go away, so I don't have to do anything different. So a lack of I'm not going to say a lack of personal responsibility. I'm going to say a lack of understanding personal responsibility is a key factor in failure to launch. And then, you throw in maybe some mental illness, you throw in these emotional issues, anxiety, the frustrations, the depression, just the cycling of that. And, we can all have mental health issues that don't require a diagnosis, that don't require medication. We can all go through mental dips. That's what anxiety is. That's what depression is. That's what our frustrations are. So, and then you add in some substance abuse, and then it starts with substance use, and then it becomes substance abuse. And now it's on. Now all that's stuck in that stage or whatever we're at in that place in our life. At 14 or whatever, 18 or 25 or whatever it is. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's, of course, we failed to launch. We, for whatever reason, aren't equipped to go to the next stage. We have a problem with persistence, isolation, difficulty identifying actual problems, and I'm going to use the addiction one as an example. The addict thinks that they have a drinking or using problem, and so we will address the drinking and the using, and then we're confused because we keep relapsing. And then we repeat that cycle. So we don't just apply it to our addiction, or the addiction part of our life, but we're applying it to everything in life. We're not really sure what the actual problem is. We only know what would make us feel bad. And so we address that. That's the emotional or the lack of emotional management. Lacking direction and procrastinate the next step of life. Now, that looks like, if you're just looking at it on paper, it looks like, wow, this person is just like a little gremlin stuck in the basement with no life. But in reality, there's a lot of other characteristics going on. There's areas of high achievement, high success, clearly high intelligence, dreams, ambitions, motivations, and yet we have difficulty, and that's what the persistence is about. We may make attempts, number 6, problems with persistence. We may make attempts to seek out and chase those goals. We may make attempts to do certain things that would be good, that we want to do, we want to contribute to the world, but we can give up very easily. The first sign of failure, the first sign of trouble, all is lost. So it's a failure to launch is even worse with substance abusers or addiction. But I haven't looked this one up, but I would venture to guess that of whatever the percentage is that we think of that would fall under the failure to launch category, how many of them become addicts? And at the very least, how many become substance abusers? I'm going to say most. And the study that I was looking at, they actually indicated drugs, alcohol, cell phone, video games, anime, and fantasy. So even though we might not get into substance abuse, we become fixated with video games. We become fixated with anime or just anything fantasy. I know there's a big discussion about anime and stuff like that. Is there anything wrong with that? It's considered an art form. There's nothing wrong with pain medication either, until you take 60 of them a day. Right? It's not the thing, it's the compulsion of the thing. So it's going to be 100%. Right? Failure to launch patients are going to 100% of the time develop these because putting a complete life together is beyond us, beyond our capability. Let me put it that way. I think that's a really good description, which means we can learn. We just, for whatever reason, we just didn't learn how to put it all together. It doesn't mean we weren't taught. It doesn't mean it wasn't modeled for us. It means for whatever reason, and there are some, but they can be different for everybody, we just didn't put it all together. this, I personally recognize this a lot. This number 10 under the symptoms that will procrastinate the next step of life. I remember nearing the end of high school and being scared to death of what was going to come next. Scared to death. And it was a tumultuous time. I won't get into all the details, but some of my dreams had already been dashed. There was no way I was ever going to be a professional tennis player, and personal things going on, and it just was what it was. So you want to just kind of stay in that. It's kind of the meme where you see in the TVs and movies all the time, where high school kids are gathered at their local pizza place, and there's always the 35-year-old guy that was the former quarterback star or the former football star, and he's still hanging out. He still can't leave high school, even though he's, whatever, much older. Well, that's what that is. That's a failure to launch. Because as we grow, our interests are growing with us. And that overwhelming fear that we just don't know what to do at the next step, even though people are guiding us, people are teaching us, people are helping us, it can be unbelievably scary. And so we stay stuck. We rely on what we've already developed in our emotional survival skills. And that is, until I know exactly how it's going to turn out, I'm not even going to take my first step. I need to know all the details. I need to know that it's going to work the first time, because I can't handle any failure, because that'll mean I'm a loser, and I don't want to feel like a loser. So, it's this self-defeating thinking cycle. The compulsions, which I kind of already touched on, but drugs, alcohol, phone, fixations, go beyond that. Maybe you recognize some things in yourself that aren't anything I put on the board. And that's not hard to do with social media. When I say phone, just put all of that in the phone category, or maybe the fantasy category. It can be a good task, or it could be a good whatever, but that's not the problem. The problem is how we're using it. Right? All I ever want to do is just ride my motorcycle. Okay, well, what about work? Nope, got to ride my motorcycle. What about your family? Nope, got to ride my motorcycle. It's the same thing. It becomes this fixation, which is underneath all that is failure to launch. It's a person that is afraid to grow up, and we'll say ill-equipped within themselves. So this is an identifier. Fail to engage properly in activities that define adulthood. What would that look like? Taking care of my own bills. Yeah, but I'm only 18, I'm only 19, I'm only 30, I'm only, I went all the way up to 38. And we can rationalize that. But that's not adulting. That's failure to launch. But we can learn. There's not always a clear-cut reason, but it's always associated with anxiety, depression, mental health spurts, isolation, and then we just get stuck. Remember, it's hard to talk about this one without bringing all or so much of the other stuff with it. In our emotional survival mode, we develop perfectionism. And we need everything to be a certain way. And we can get really good at kind of managing that in some areas. But when it comes to putting it all together, part of that perfectionism is this idea that I've got to put it all together by this time tomorrow. That's what a failure to launch brain is thinking. And don't minimize the comparing ourselves. Growing up in a family, I'm just self-disclosing. Growing up in a family, my grandfather was very successful in the things that he did, and my father was a highly educated man, even though he was an alcoholic. My brother, everything came really easy. There was nobody ever came to me and said, you have to follow this path. But you can grow up in environments like that, and you can determine that for yourself. This is the expectation, and if I don't reach it, I'm a loser. Even though that's not what's happening. That's not at all what's happening. This is the sickness of failure to launch, right? It's this emotional and mental distortion. Where did I leave off? Okay, here's the illusions. And this is what I was kind of referring to earlier, where we can have these illusions about how failure to launch doesn't apply to me. Or, well, I was an addict, or I went through a bad period, but that wasn't failure to launch. And so we can have these illusions, or really delusions, because we can go through periods of self-sufficiency where we're taking care of our own shelter, our own car, our own bills, our own job, or we're living up to personal responsibilities, adulting. And so we use that and we say, see, I'm not failure to launch. But we're avoiding, we failed to launch emotionally, which is why we are fixated on video games and anime, and we use drugs and alcohol and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so we will always cycle, even if we'll say we're landing on our own feet, and we don't have to, we'll go stay with a buddy for 6 months, and then I'll go get another place on my own. Even if we're doing that and we're not actually resorting back to home, it's still failure to launch because we're emotionally immature. And if you get really honest with yourself, you'll recognize, well, my grandfather pays half of that. My mom did the down payment on that. I only pay those bills 6 months out of the year, and my grandma pays the other 6. And when we get really honest with ourselves, you start breaking it down. Are those bad things? Of course not. It's not the thing. It's what we think about the thing. And so it becomes this unspoken expectation. Maybe, I'm going to say, in most cases, it's not even identified. It's an unidentified thought in our mind, expectation. So it'll be okay. I'll tell you what, for me, when my grandfather said, you and I are going to part company now, we're going to have to part company, and my mom said, basically, we're not going to help you stay sick, but we'll help you get better, and then they meant it. That was my, oh man, this is real. I gotta grow up. I gotta take responsibility, which is scary because I didn't know how. I didn't really know what that looked like. And you figure up like your monthly bills, and you're like, oh my gosh, how could I ever do that? And then you quickly realize you're already doing it. I'm just not spending it properly, or I'm not managing it well. Well, that's that emotional maturity. What's going on with me that I think I can work hard and I can do this and I can earn a living, but I don't really need to manage it well because I can always call my mom and she'll make a mortgage payment for me. That's failure to launch. And that's where I was at 38. And it took me until I was about 40 to even begin to kind of put that foundation together. What I was just describing, what we call that, these people who go through periods of self-sufficiency and think that makes them unique and failure to launch doesn't apply, is really what we call a functioning user or a functioning alcoholic. We've just managed to keep some of the balls in the air enough that we can adapt and say, this is good enough for me. But I don't think that's what our group wants. Our group wants to meet our potential, or at least always be striving towards it. They say, if you're thinking right, you're never going to achieve it. You're never going to reach your full potential. But we should always be in the process of seeking it. And then we spend the rest of our lives, trying to be more like Jesus. That's it. But we don't get there in this life. Failure to launch is not even moving anywhere in that direction. So here we are in this column. These are the areas that we want to start focusing on. And of course, the solution always starts with, we got to get honest with ourselves. We've been talking about that a lot this week. Getting honest with ourselves. Man, I wish I I meant to send Tim a message. I didn't write his quote down from last night. Where he's talking about fantasy and reality, and
I don't remember what it was.
oh man, it was so
It was
good.
though.
It was so good. Um, and surrender. Okay, so here's an idea. Let me see if I can put this one together. What he was talking about, this gentleman was talking about, was how his mentor kept bringing him back to the most simple idea of being surrendered, right? We're either going to completely surrender to a new way of thinking, which leads to a new way of acting, or we're not. There's no gray area. Half measures avail us nothing. Clinicians call that partialization. We can't do some of it some of the time. It has to become our manner of living. And every time he would get to a point where he would start saying, well, I think I'm good now. I don't really need to go to that thing, and I don't see the point in that. His mentor would remind him, well, but you said you were surrendered. Well, I am surrendered. It's just that, and that's what it looks like when we start taking back our surrender. We've got to be willing to be so honest with ourselves in those little bitty intangible nuance moments. The minute I'm questioning, debating, critiquing what I think should happen next, and it's not based on a strategy, it's not based on a goal, it's not based on any kind of purpose, it's not based on our social contracts like we were talking about. That's just how I feel. I just don't think I need to do that thing today. That's not what surrendered is. And that's our failure to launch is so overcrowded with our lack of surrender because we don't know. We don't know what's what. We don't know how to identify the problem. So these three areas here, if we will be honest with ourselves about them and then seek to grow in them, and it's really the easy part. I think that one of the most powerful things I finally came to recognize in my early recovery is I don't have to think about it. I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to put it all together. I do not have to suddenly come up with some master plan where I can finally put a complete life together. I just needed to keep showing up where they told me to show up and just do what they suggested I do. And life got so simple. And all of a sudden, things that we've spent, 30, 35, 40, 45 years trying to put together, it just happens organically when we quit fighting it. But motivation is a big one. So in our failure to launch, we can lack motivation to set goals. Now think about all the areas in your life that you're already good at. And you probably set some goals for that. I'm going to get my driver's license. So I need to enroll in driver's ed, and then I'm going to go to those classes, and I'm going to study the thing, and I'm going to do the paperwork, and then I'm going to go to the DMV, and then I'm going to get the thing, and then we have the ability to set goals, but we can lack motivation to set goals for things that we're not really confident in. And setting a goal would be putting us out there. Remember the emotional survival mode. If I set a goal and I don't achieve it, then all will be lost, and I don't want to feel like that, so I'm just not going to set goals, and hopefully something will work out. That's the lack of motivation. It's not laziness, it's overwhelming fear. I'm going to get into that in a minute. There's more to come on that. The second point, or the second area, is lack of resilience. In our failure to launch, we tend to lack resilience. We lack the coping skills to handle adversity. When we hear no, or when something doesn't work out, we don't respond well to it. Because we're personalizing it, we're internalizing it. We have an underdeveloped emotions. We have an inability, no, not an inability, we lack the understanding or the perseverance to just push through something because of how we're interpreting it. You know, it goes with the first one. You know, we lack a drive or we lack motivation because of fear. Because if I don't reach my goal 100% in whatever unrealistic timeline I've given myself, then I'll be a loser, and I don't want to do that. Versus interpreting, if I don't reach my goal, then I need to reevaluate some things, and I need to make some corrections here, and I need to make some corrections there, and keep pushing toward the goal. In failure to launch, we lack that resilience. We're operating out of fear. The third area is entitlement and unrealistic expectations. Entitlement, that sounds harsh. Nobody wants to be called entitled. Oh, that person, they're so entitled. But the truth is entitlement is literally just expecting something to happen just because. That's all entitlement is. And failure to launch, we have it in spades. We have having our needs met without effort. Sure, we can have our needs met and not even think to say thank you. You know, that's where you really know, man, you're dealing with someone who has a big sense of entitlement. They're not even recognizing what has happened. There's no gratitude. Gratitude and entitlement can't live in the same house. Think about that. So, and I wish I'd put that on the board, because that's one of the strongest ways to start overcoming entitlement, is start identifying things that we're grateful for. But then we have to make our words happen. I can't say, oh, I'm so grateful for my family support, and I'm so grateful for my boss letting me come back, and I'm so grateful to be sober today, and I'm so grateful, and then immediately return to behavior that doesn't represent change. It represents the same old failure to launch person. It's lip service. And in our failure to launch, we can have a lot of lip service. We lack the motivation to pursue meaningful goals, and that kind of goes with the first one for the same reasons. We expect success. There's an entitlement in that, expecting success. How do you know that that's what you're dealing with? Entitlement doesn't mean arrogance. It's part of our emotional survival mode. I'm expecting it. Oh, it'll just work out. Oh, somehow, some way. Well, when we're expecting success, we not only give up easily, we become very easily irritated. And that's why, we spend so much time on unrealistic expectations. So let's come up with an example for that. You're going to go to the movies tonight, and however that's going to play out, you're going to drive there, you're going to park, you're going to go in, you're going to get the ticket, you're going to get popcorn. But in our entitlement thinking, we haven't even gotten a half mile away, and we're already getting a little irritable because the traffic is moving slow. And then we finally get to the parking lot, and we're going to have to park and walk, and then all these other things. That is an ongoing thought process that says, everything's supposed to go easy for me. That's why when it doesn't, remember, we're underdeveloped. So we can treat those experiences just like a 10-year-old, just like a 12-year-old. That's what it looks like when we're expecting success and then we give up easy. You know what, just forget it. I should have never even agreed to go to the movies. I don't even want to do this anymore. And we just swing back emotionally. All or nothing, that's what that is. Just forget it. I don't even like that movie. I don't even like those people. I don't even like their popcorn. I don't even like... And we're just off in our little mental tangent. That's what it looks like. The disillusioned and frustrated, of course, they go together. Well, yeah, we're disillusioned because we think that we're supposed to have our needs met without any effort. It's all disillusionment. I think because I have these 5 things that this doesn't apply. I think that because I've done these 3 things, I shouldn't have to act a certain way. It all goes together. The last one on entitlement and unrealistic expectations is all of this leads to chronic anxiety that we don't know how to process. Sit in that one for a minute. So what does it look like when I'm exhibiting chronic anxiety? It doesn't mean we're running around fluttering and yelling, and no, it's just inside our head. Our head is spinning. We can't sit still. We're moving, we're thinking, we're overthinking. And we're not expressing it to anybody. We're not communicating it to anybody. Right? We're trying to problem solve. We identify the problem of anxiety as being situational. We go, oh, I'm so anxious right now. I feel so bored, anxious. I know, I need a different situation. And then we go to a different situation. Oh man, I'm so bored, I'm so anxious. Until ultimately we end up doing the one thing that we know will, at least in the beginning, give us a little relief. Drugs, alcohol, phone, video games, anime, fantasy, pornography, just go down the list. Which makes perfect sense, because in failure to launch, we don't know what the actual problem is. So the solution that we always come up with keeps it going, right? It just repeats it. We don't know what the solution is. If we could identify the actual problem, we would have solved it a long time ago. So the most important thing to overcoming failure to launch starts with getting honest with ourselves. I got to get honest with myself. I've got to be able to admit these things on the board. I've got to be able to admit that, yes, this, definitely this, I'm not emotionally equipped to be in the world as an adult. But I can learn, which requires a lot of healing. I can heal, but I got to be willing. And that's why I put that on the solution. Even though it seems real simple, it seems very vague and general, it's literal. I just have to be honest with myself about myself. Do you have the life that you want to have today? No. Are you willing to learn how? Yes. Then we become teachable. What does it look like when we're being teachable? And this is also what Tim was referring to last night. What it looks like when we're being teachable. We're honest enough with ourselves to know we don't know. And then whatever someone else that we're trusting, that has the credibility, is suggesting something to us, we follow that. When we're not being willing, we may say, oh no, I'm ready, I am being honest with myself, and I am teachable. But when we get guidance that would affect change, we reject it. Okay, well, here's what you should do. Do these 3 things every day for the rest of your life, and everything else will fall into place. And we reject it. But in our mind, we still think that we're being teachable. What we're doing is we're giving lip service, which is what we've always done, because we don't know what the real problem is. We want to debate everything. We want to critique everything. We want to question everything. We want to reject everything. It doesn't feel good. I don't see the point in that. I don't see how that's going to help me. Maybe next week I might try that. What are we waiting for when we're trying to make changes in our lives, but we're rejecting the solution? What is actually happening? What are we waiting for? We're scared to death of the next step. Because the next step, I'm going to actually have to do those things. I'm going to actually have to become self-sufficient in my emotions, in my thought processes, in the way I carry myself, and the efforts that I make, taking personal responsibility. It's easy to stay 4. It's easy to stay 12. It's easy to stay 18. It's also easy to grow up. We just got to surrender. That's it. If we knew how to get there, we'd already be there. So it's not really this big mountain that we were so afraid of. I mean, that was, I'm not kidding, that was one of the biggest revelations for me in my early journey. Because I thought the same thing. We're thinking, oh my gosh, if I'm really going to take complete responsibility, that means I got to pay for my own cell phone bill, and I'm not going to be on my mom's insurance anymore, and I can't seek their help making my mortgage payment and the insurance and all these things, the car payment and the gas and the groceries and the daycare and the whatever. That is scary. And failure to launch, you know, that's one of it prevents us from setting achievable goals because we don't think we're going to meet them anyway. But that's not how it works. All we have to do is be honest with ourselves about our situation and be teachable and willing to change. And God always puts right people in front of us. And then all we got to do is follow their suggestions, directions, guidance, whatever. And I've never seen that not work. And obviously I've dealt with a lot of failure to launch because we all are to a degree, including myself. I've never seen it not work out. The only time it doesn't work out is when the person isn't getting honest with themselves, they're not being teachable, and they're not really willing to change. They're stuck in the somehow magically it'll happen. Somehow magically I'm going to wake up one day and I'm going to be emotionally mature. I'm going to have a ton of money sitting in the bank. I'm going to know exactly how to manage that money. I'm going to have a house. I'm going to have 4 cars. And I shouldn't have to make any effort toward that because what's programmed in my brain is someone else has always done it, or someone else will always do it. And what's funny to me about that is, I mean, that was me, that was my thinking, but it's such common thinking among us, you know, among addiction, substance abusers. And it is absolutely like 8-year-old thinking, 4-year-old thinking, 12-year-old thinking. But if we're ever confronted about that, man, we will fight that. We will debate that. We want to argue that. We're literally living out the failure to launch. When all we got to do is get honest, teachable, and willing. That's it. So maybe a good question to, like a reflective question to ask yourself is, what am I waiting for? What am I waiting for? Am I waiting until I don't feel fear? Am I waiting to have proof? Am I waiting to know, I forget where it is, to know exactly how it will happen? Well, that's failure to launch thinking. That's that I've got to go it alone thinking. I should have put, I mean, surrender obviously is a big part of that, but so make that number 4. Honest, teachable, willing, now I got to surrender. The failure to launch thing is a really interesting topic, and it's so prevalent. It always has been. It's always been there. It just wasn't until the 80s when the guy really kind of solidified it for everybody. But it's happening every day, all over the world. Young men and women have difficulty growing up. That's not a new idea. But with us, it becomes serious issues. And so, you know, you guys have heard me say this. I think we'll say 60% of recovery is just growing up. It's just being willing to grow up. Taking, you know, because that's always the solution. Taking personal responsibility, being accountable, making your words have meaning, servicing other people, helping other people, giving of yourself, sacrificing, delaying gratification instead of instant gratification, being willing to do things you don't want to do, but you recognize that they're important to do. That's just adulting. That's just what adults do every day. Adults spend 85% of their days doing things they don't want to do. In fact, you know, at some point, you're not even, adults don't even think like that. right? Well, hey, did you want to do all those things you did? Want to, need? I don't know. I just did them because they're the next thing to do. Because your self-esteem is not tied to it, right? Your sense of self isn't tied to getting what you want when you want it. Children spend 85% of their day doing what they want to do. And that's just kind of that's my own little rough percentage. It could be more like 90-10, who knows? So if we have failure to launch and we want to grow up, we want to learn how to adult, all we got to do is start doing things we don't want to do. That's how you'll know that you're growing. How many things today did you do that you didn't want to do? And you should start rattling off like 10 things. Well, I made my bed. I made that tough phone call. I did that thing that usually I have my mom do. You know, it doesn't have to be big things. It's just things we don't want to do, that we usually either didn't do it at all or we waited for someone else to do it. Well, when you change that and you start doing what you don't want to do, but you're willing to do it because it's important, right? You can't just like, well, I didn't want to walk across the street, but I did it. Okay, there has to be some significance in your life. I did it. I did what I didn't want to do because people are telling me that if I would do that, my life will change. And remember, since we've become honest, teachable, willing, and surrendered, we do it. Everything else is just lip service. So if 60% of recovery is just learning how to grow up, what is there to be afraid of? Nothing. We just have to be willing to do it. That's it. You guys want to share anything? I'm gonna let us out of here early today. We're 1 minute early.
That number 9, that lack of direction. I don't know if this applies or not, but you know, our at the time 18-year-old, who's 19 now, when his last year of high school, he took his high school classes, and then he took classes at the VOTEC, and he had decided he didn't want to go to college. He was going to be an auto mechanic. Great, you know, not everybody's supposed to go to college.
Yeah.
Although, you know, lots of people think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he graduated and said, I don't want to do that.
Wow.
So all of a sudden there was no plan. And so the parents said, well, you have to get a job, you know. And so he looked and looked and he found something, you know, I mean, it paid $14 an hour, which was, he'd had a job at a grocery store, but it didn't pay $14 an hour.
Yeah.
And, you know, he thought he was, you know, that was big money. But he was working full-time. It came with insurance if he wanted the insurance. And he worked it, but then he decided he didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
And they said, you cannot quit that job until you find another job.
Yeah.
And so he decided he wanted to go back to school this summer and took a class, and he loved it.
Huh.
And he made an A in it.
Huh.
And it was like he did a 360. He had some friends. Most of his friends went to college. And not 100%, but most of them. And it was just interesting to watch the, you know, the kind of, I don't know what I want to do, I don't know what I do. Well, I guess I'll do this because everybody's saying I should do something.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really want to do that. Well, now what am I going to do? You know, and he kept kind of growing and changing, and so
But
now
the,
he's,
the
Yeah.
job enforced discipline.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay?
did.
And he learned discipline.
Yeah.
You know, I gotta get to work by, 7:30.
Mhm.
You know, I gotta get up on my own. Mom's not waking me up. You know, I gotta get to work. You know, I gotta be a good employee. The feedback he got was that they felt like he is a good employee.
Yeah, I'll bet.
You know, but then he's gone on this part-time while he was in this course. But I think, that discipline helped him,
Yeah.
focus on, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do the course. I can accomplish this. And so now in the fall, he's going to do more courses.
Wow.
And
Wow.
So,
But when he went
Just
down,
needs
he
some
went down
space.
to 2 days of work so he could take the class, which
Wow.
was 2 days. And then they just said, well, you don't need to come in on Friday. And, so, his finances changed.
Right.
And he
Looking
said,
for some extra shifts.
I guess I'm gonna have to watch what I spend,
Yep.
Ding.
Yep.
And so
At 19, that's huge.
it was
That's huge.
interesting to
Yeah.
see him watch, and then they've been wanting to move into this apartment, on their own, 3 of them.
Oh, wow.
And then they suddenly realized, well, our one friend, every time he gets a girlfriend, he moves in with a girlfriend. So maybe he's not that reliable
Yeah.
as one of the 3.
Yeah.
And so now they've got it down to 2, and they found something that they think they like. But it's just been interesting to watch the transformation.
Yeah. He's in that growing up period, and he's responding to it.
Yeah.
Well, he is. He's becoming
Yeah.
more disciplined, more mature.
Yeah.
And the
That's
courses
huge.
that he signed up for in the fall, and his mother says, that involves math. Because he struggled with math in high school.
Oh, wow.
He says, I know it. I can do it. I can do it.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. That's so cool. And so many guys, me included, you get to that age and you're just not really sure what you're supposed to do, but instead of following some guidance and some direction, it's so easy for some of us to just check out and just get lost in whatever fantasy, the club scene, or whatever it is. But regardless, we can all make our way back around, but it starts with just being honest. And he's always been pretty sharp, isn't he? Yeah. That's a cool story. Okay, guys, thanks for watching on YouTube, and we will be back next Thursday.